Chapter 17. Let's talk, children. Why can't you just listen to me for once? I shouted, throwing a suitcase at Matteo. He ducked it. Obviously alpha reflexes. Curse them. But bless them. I'd hate to see such a glorious face as his with a massive bruise or worse. Maybe if you said something sensible. I would, he remarked, making my blood boil. It was sensible. Kaye. You meet a god. He reminded me by saying what caused this whole argument in the first place. I'll be in a room full of alphas. In what world does it make sense that I need a guard? You may not be able to understand this through that thick head of yours. Matteo hollered, pointing his finger at my forehead. I swatted it away like the psycho that I am, causing him to take a few steps backward. No doubt trying to avoid an accidental slap to the face. But not every alpha out likes me. Wonder why? I deadpanned, throwing my arms up. You're unbelievable. Thanks. I'll take it as a compliment. I snapped, chucking a remote at his head. God. Just pack your King bag. Then leave me alone. So I can. I shouted back at him, causing him to storm out of the room and slam the door shut. I'm surprised it was still attached to the hinges after that one. Things were going pretty smoothly lately. It told me I was being assigned a guard for the leaders' conference in 2 days. I was okay with it until he told me that it was going to be Daniela. I tried to calmly reason with him and explain why it would be much smarter to assign Jack to me instead of the Blanchie. But he just would not listen. He said Jack needed to stay with the pack and look over them while we were gone. I hope Dan kills me just to prove him wrong. Extreme and highly unnecessary. I know. Sure. Have the one person who wants me dead protect me. Thanks. Why don't you just squeeze lemons into my asshole while you're at it? I muttered to myself as I retrieved the suitcase that I had thrown from the other side of the room. I groaned, heaving it up off of the floor and carried it over to the bed. Oh man, I didn't realize how heavy this was. I'm more of a, when life gives you lemons, make lemon water kinda guy. But whatever you're into, I guess. Jack suddenly piped in, which managed to scare the crap out of me. My eyes flew to the door to meet his bright emerald ones, showing a great amount of amusement within them. No doubt. He found it hilarious that he just managed to almost make me pee myself. When the heck did you get here? I asked him. Muscular Frame was leaning against the door frame, watching me unzip the suitcase. You were talking to yourself. And I slipped in. I was heading to the kitchen, but I passed Teo in the hallway, and he told me to get up here and watch you. He looked like he was having a hard time controlling himself. Jack commented, You guys lose your not arguing streak. I groaned in frustration and tiredly belly flopped onto the bed. I just laid there with my face buried in the blankets that Matteo and I didn't care enough to correct after sleeping. I'll take that as a yes. Jack sighed. A few seconds later I felt the bed dip beside me as Jack sat down. What happened now? WHJUH Nari. I mumbled into the bed, not bothering to pick my head up. What jet's near Harry? Jack asked. Confusion was obviously laced in his tone, causing me to groan. I lifted my head up just to repeat myself, and then let my face smack back into the bed. We just never agree. Oh, Jack drug out in realization. Wow, I was really off. You guys were doing decent there for a while. What happened? With another groan, I rolled my body over so I was now laying on my back with body sprawled out on the bed staring at the ceiling. He's assigning Daniela to guard me at the leaders' conference. I grumbled, glaring holes into the white ceiling. Oh yeah, I was informed. Jack said slowly. I wasn't sure, but I think he was trying to think out where he was going before he said it, so I didn't get mad over something stupid and attack him. Daniela is the Gamma. It only makes sense to assign her to be your guard. Kaye. He just wants to make sure you're protected to the best of his ability. I knew he was only doing it for my safety, but honestly, I get that she's the 3rd strongest PEC member at all, but I feel like she can't be much better than the 4th. Can't we just go with him or her instead? I definitely didn't trust Daniela with my life, and I couldn't wrap my head around why Matteo did. There has got to be someone else, someone who doesn't want me to choke on a razor blade. At least, I said as I ran my hands down my face. I get that you and Donnie don't exactly have the best friendship. Jack stated the obvious, signing him a look from me and a quick, oh, you don't say. But she takes her position in the pack very seriously. If she's given a task from Matteo to protect you with her life, she will. She might not favor you, but you're still her Luna. I cringed ridiculously hard. It probably just looked like the ghost of Jesus Christ shoved his finger into my eyeball. Don't say that word, I commanded. Jack's brows knit together in confusion, and his head tilted to the side. What word? The old one. Luna. Again. Cringe. There were some rogues that craved power. They spent their entire lives trying to take down Elphys and overthrow packs, just to lead them themselves. I wasn't like that at all. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I just like to cause destruction, watch everything crumble, and then get out of there as soon as possible. Being in an authoritative position just didn't sound appealing to me. It sounded like a lot of work. Don't, I warned, lowly, making Jack roll his eyes. What a dramatic. You can't just avoid what you were born to do. Yeah. I know. I snapped. Jack just laughed lightly at my obvious frustration. You should be proud of yourself. Now it was my turn to be confused. Proud of what? There are a lot of girls out there, and for some reason you were chosen for Matteo. He's the alpha of Edis. Kaye. Being his mate isn't just a job that could be fulfilled by anybody. Well, if you haven't noticed, I haven't been able to fulfill it either. I muttered, returning my annoyed gaze back to the ceiling. All we do is argue and make out. That's it. We fight until we get in bed and the clothes come off. We kiss until things get out of hand. And then we stop. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. So I'll admit that you do tend to butt heads. I think that's why you two work. We don't work. You're the only person who has the balls to constantly challenge and stand up to him. I feel like that definitely counts for something. Jack reasoned. I thought about it for a second, but it still didn't matter. I mean, what good is being able to push his buttons if nothing really comes out of it? Doesn't matter. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He never listens to anything I have to say. I retorted. Have you met an alpha? Since when do they like to be proven wrong? He had a point. It was stupid point. But still a point. That's still no excuse. I argued adamantly. He's just stubborn. Well, he needs to be less stubborn. I stated, becoming frustrated with Jack, who seemed to have an answer to everything. Because you're any better. Okay. I get it. I snapped, flailing my hands in the air above me. I just don't see much compatibility between us. And I'm sure he doesn't either. You practically have him wrapped around your finger. Jack coughed. I narrowed my eyes at the ceiling. I don't know what Jack thinks the phrase wrapped around your finger means, but it's definitely not a way to describe Matteo and I's relationship. I don't think you know what that phrase means. Jack, it may not seem like it, but the Matteo you know is the softest, mushiest Matteo I've ever seen. He said a matter of facty. Matteo, soft, mushy. No. I don't think so. I know for a fact that Matteo is neither soft nor mushy emotionally or physically. I would know. I felt up his well-defined ABS many times. 2 words, rock solid. He lets you get away with so much. Jack exasperated. Like going into his office. No one is allowed in there unless requested, but there you go, just sauntering right on in. And he lets you. Not to mention, you bust his balls every chance you get. And he hasn't even tried to make you submit to him. God forbid. If I would tell him no and walk out of the room, he would throw me through a F-King wall. He's practically putty in your hands. I stayed silent. For the first time, K.I.A. didn't know what to say. Shocking. Someone call the world news or maybe a doctor. Yeah. Probably a doctor. It may not seem like he listens, but he does. Trust me. He does. Again, I stayed quiet. I silently cursed Jack for always knowing what to say. I would never quite understand how he knew how to comfort and understand people so well. He should have been the Luna. With a sigh, I pushed myself up from the bed. Jack's eyes were blue to me as I made my way over to the door and yanked it open. "What are you doing now?" "Going to find my mate," I mumbled, catching a proud smile cross Jack's face. "Smug little bugger. I'd check the training room's first floor." I nodded, not bothering to say thank you. I actually was thankful he had told me to check the training rooms. It saved me a trip to Matteo's office where I figured he would have been. I'd been to the training rooms twice with Jack. The first time I went, Jack got a new pair of boxing gloves and wanted to see how they felt. After practically proclaiming his love to them, he let me try them. I told him a few times that I didn't need them. I preferred to fight with my fists bare. But Jack insisted. He said it made for more fun seeing as how you don't either scrap with busted knuckles when you're just messing around for fun. So I put the gloves on and punched him in the gut. I'd never seen Jack want to murder me so badly. The second time we went there, Jack wanted to show me that he could indeed do 207 pull, up straight. I got bored when he hit 150, so I ended up part-sing him. He ultimately let go of the pull, up bar and collapsed into a heap on the floor with his shorts around his ankles. Since then, Jack hasn't taken me back. I could smell the training room before I saw it. The training room was much different from the training fields. The fields were just some grass with some random padded areas barricaded off for sparring. The training room was more of a room for lifting weights, running, and stuff more of that sort. There was a ring to fight in, which is the place where I punched Jack in the gut. There was also air conditioning, which was something the fields didn't have. I enjoyed that tremendously. I stepped into the training room feeling sticky from the sweaty atmosphere almost instantly. Immediately, everyone's eyes fell on me. I did my best just to act like they weren't all staring at me as if I just pooped on the middle of the mat. I figured Matteo would be punching a punching bag, but instead he was benching a massive amount of weight shirtless. Oh Lord, Matteo was definitely a god, but looking at him in that moment made me feel anything but holy. Holy shit, I gaped. That's like 4 of me. Matteo placed the bar holding the various amounts of weight on it onto the rack and sat up on the bench to look at me. His Mediterranean and blue eyes held a whole lot of confusion. Well, he obviously wasn't expecting me to show up here. "Kaya, I'm not arguing with you," he began to say. But I interrupted him. "Let's go take a nap." He looked completely thrown off. Crap. That was a bit aggressive, maybe too aggressive. At this point, I was ready for another argument. It could honestly be about anything. We were always finding something to argue about. Maybe he'd get mad because I interrupted him. Maybe he'd get mad at me for trying to boss him around. I mentally cursed myself for starting yet another fight. I should have just followed our normal routine, and we could be making out later and be pissed at one another tomorrow. I turned around to leave without saying anything. "Jack, I hate you and your advice," I thought to myself just before I was lifted up and thrown over a shoulder. "Matteo, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Automatically knowing who was man, handling me, he didn't answer me as we exited the training room, and he carried me through the house. I knew he was ignoring me because there was no way he didn't hear me scream. I'm pretty sure the entire house probably heard me. "Put me down. You animal. Your shoulder is pressing into my spleen." I groaned as he opened a door. "Metug," I grunted as I was tossed onto a bed, Matteo's bed. "What was that for? If I come back here and you aren't still sitting on this bed, I will drag your ass back and tie you to it," Matteo stated before turning around to go into the attached bathroom for what I assumed is a shower. I had a feeling he wasn't bluffing. I bet he never bluffs. I hope he's not bluffing. Matteo probably figured his threat was going to scare me into staying put. "Joke's on you, buddy. That sounds like something I'd actually enjoy." I didn't know why he felt the need to threaten me to stay in the room. He was probably just worried I'd try to run. I wasn't going to push it. It's Matteo. He always acts like someone pissed in his Cheerios. Matteo was in and out of the shower extremely fast. I wasn't complaining. I was actually quite impressed. He abruptly opened the bathroom door, and I immediately noticed his eyes scan the room to find me. I think he was expecting me to move at least a little bit, but I remained exactly where he had placed me. I'm pretty sure by this point his mind was blown due to the fact that I actually listened to him for once. I, on the other hand, could feel my ovaries practically exploding within me like little firecrackers seeing my mate enter the room with nothing but a towel hung lowly around his waist. Don't even get me started on his dark, wet hair and the little droplets of water cascading down that perfectly defined chest of his. And all this time, I thought just his scent was orgasm-inducing. I figured my ogling session would be cut short once Matteo grabbed his clothes. I assumed he was going to put them on in the bathroom. But no, he dropped his towel right then and there. All I could think was, yes, that's mine. Bless Matteo for being so blessed in every way, shape and form. Just bless. It would be a lie if I said I was okay with Matteo putting pants on. I wasn't, but I dealt with it. You really have no shame, do you? Matteo asked, obviously noticing me staring. It was hard not to. Not really. No, but I mean you were standing without clothes in front of me. Was that not an invitation to stare? No, it was. Well, I drug out, handing me a slight chuckle from Matteo. Whoops. I almost got him to smile. How tragic would that have been? Matteo wandered over to his closet and began reaching for a shirt before I stopped him. Don't even bother. It'll be off anyway. With that, Matteo made his way over to the bed and got in, putting me down with him. I was never much of a napper. I slept long enough at night that I didn't have to, so I wasn't tired at all. Matteo, on the other hand, looked more than happy to pass out at 3 in the afternoon. His arm was wrapped protectively around my body, which happened to be pressed directly against him. I could practically feel every devote in his chest against my back. I seriously wanted to take my shirt off, but for once I didn't want things to take a sexual turn. Well, my heart didn't. My body was more than willing to make babies. What's your middle name? I asked randomly. What? Matteo sounded half asleep. I felt kinda bad for keeping him up when he wanted to nap. What's your middle name? I repeated. A moment passed before Matteo answered. Oriano. Different. I commented. Matteo Oriano nes ie. Sounds very Italian. It is very Italian. He concluded what I already knew. I waited a moment for him to ask me what mine was, but he never did. My middle name is Parker after my dad. Parker Elish. I continued talking. It was going to be Alexei after my mom, but they decided not to for some reason. I mumbled off, not really feeling like talking about how my brother was named after my mom, Kate and Alexei. Yeah, I didn't really feel like mentioning him at all. You seem very talkative today, Matteo commented. I sighed and rolled over in his arms so that I was facing him. His eyes were open, watching me squirm until I got comfortable. My head laid itself on his bare chest. I just want to talk. We don't talk much, I muttered. We talk all the time. I sighed and shook my head. Screaming at each other doesn't count. The only thing we learn from that is how loud we can be. Okay, he sighed as he rubbed my back with his large hand. I could tell this was getting really uncomfortable for Matteo. He didn't seem like someone who enjoyed opening up very much. Then again, neither was I. I have more secrets under my belt than I can count. Some of the biggest ones including my brother. The fact that I was in a cell for the past 4 years. I murdered countless people, and was on my way to murdering Jack when the mate Bond decided to swerve on him. What do you want to talk about? He asked hastily. I don't know. We sat in silence for a little bit, just thinking about what the heck to say to each other. When we were mad, the words just seemed to flow from our mouths in an abundance. The times like these had us completely brain dead. What's your favorite color? Matteo eventually asked, breaking the silence. I laughed lightly. All that time he spent thinking. And the question he comes up with is, what's your favorite color? Orange because it's a fruit. And the fruit is also orange. You black? My brows inched together. Black is not a color. I defied. Well, then I don't have a favorite color. He put bluntly. I huffed and picked my head up from his chest, so I could look him in the eye. You have to have a favorite color. Matteo lazily rolled his eyes and groaned. Fine. Blue. Well, why he groaned. Does everything have to have an explanation for you? I didn't bother answering him. I just gave him a look. It's your eye color. That wasn't so hard. I mocked, making him scowl. The hand that was rubbing my back stopped for a sec, and just before he used it to tuck my head back onto his chest. If you could shift into any other animal besides a wolf, what would you want it to be? We continued going back and forth. I oftentimes had to really force an answer out of Matteo. I think he said, I don't know, and does it matter more than anything? I didn't exactly get an answer to that. If you could shift into any other animal besides a wolf, what would you want it to be question? He just argued with me that answering it with anything other than a wolf would be an insult to our kind. I told him I'd be a giraffe. That one was the only one I really couldn't get him to answer. Everything else he ended up answering eventually, even when I asked him what was his biggest fear. I was expecting something really manly or deep like drowning or tornadoes with some big explanation as to why it's so terrifying. And it doesn't make him any less of a man for fearing it. So one can only imagine the look of shock on my face when he hit me with a one-word answer. I really wanted to laugh, but I got scared he wouldn't answer any more of my questions if I did, so I did my best to hold it in. He didn't bother holding anything in when I told him my biggest fear was public humiliation. His exact words were, "That's stupid. You publicly humiliate yourself every day." In return, I punched him in the stomach. I expected him to yell at me or something, but instead he laughed like a real, genuine laugh. I think my ears had an orgasm. Matteo was actually kind of simple in a complex way. He had such odd answers, but after he explained himself, it made sense. His biggest pet peeve was when people talk over him because it gives him the impression that people find what he has to say irrelevant. I shyly smiled at that one. Guilty. He hates surprises. He went on an entire tangent about how he can't stand to be surprised because it completely throws him off. He feels like he loses control of a situation. In high school, he played hockey. He said he played football, too, until his sophomore year. He quit because the coach was a prick. He then went on to say he hoped his coach would go deep throat a cactus. The list goes on from why he doesn't like to eat cereal to what he finds most fascinating in the world. I had told him that what I found most fascinating was how plants can breathe without lungs. But after our conversation was over and we began to doze off together, I changed it. The thing I found most fascinating was Matteo. Chapter 18, it's bigger than expected. There are a lot of things that I don't like. Some things I really don't have a reason for. Like birds, for example. I can't stand birds. Something about the way they just chirp around. Flapping their little wings makes me want to shank a baby. I did have a very good reason for strongly disliking anything classified as a vehicle. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I never had good experiences with cars. If I wasn't excessively vomiting throughout the car within the first 10 minutes of it being in motion, it would be considered a miracle. Just the thought of being in one made me queasy. I blame my parents. Growing up, we rarely rode in vehicles. Dad acted like the word car was a bad word. He always said that it wasn't worth the risk. License plates are too easy to track, gas is too expensive, I'm not getting caught without uns were just a few of the abundance of excuses that he chose to use. Okay, I'll admit that not having a license is a pretty good reason not to drive a car. But for someone who murders people for a living, not so much. We did take a bus a few times, and even a train once too. The bus was okay-ish. But I didn't last 5 minutes on the train before violently vomiting inside of some little old lady's grocery bag. She then went on to call me, DZI Odaiba, whatever that means. To be short, I didn't like cars and cars didn't like me. The end. So one can only imagine the look on my face when Matteo had so calmly told me that we were going to be flying to the leaders' conference. Flying as in a plane. A plane as in a bird car. A car with wings. I could have thrown up right then and there. Now I don't know what sort of saint I must have been in my past life, but the world was definitely working in my favor. Well, I thought that it was. At least. I felt a weight the size of Daniela's big head being lifted off my shoulders when Matteo eventually gave up trying to find all of the documents he needed so that I could board the plane. Apparently, there's this thing called a passport you need when traveling from one country to another. I never had one. I told Matteo they had never used one before, and I had crossed both the Canadian and Mexican border various times with my parents. He then proceeded to tell me that I'm a convict, and what I had done was illegal. I told him to calm down. He didn't find it humorous at all. If only he knew all that I'd done. I swear, I'm not as much of a narcissist as I sound. But I figured that since I couldn't fly on the plane to the leaders' conference that we just wouldn't go anymore. Oh, what a glamorous life that would be. My luck went from bad to worse. I hate this stupid car. I breathed heavily with my body hunched over and my hands placed firmly on my knees. True. Flying in a giant bird car for 2.5 hours to Manitoba. Canada sounds atrocious, but let me just say driving for a day and a half makes me want to bathe in a tub of battery acid. And then set myself on fire. We could have possibly been there already if it hadn't been for Matteo having to pull over so that I could drive on the side of the road every 20 minutes. With the help of some alpha that Matteo actually gets along with. Matteo and I were able to pass over the Canadian border without issue, as in we didn't need a passport. Matteo threatened to duct tape my mouth shut once I started mocking him. I had just begun calling him Captain Convict when nausea hit me once again. I almost threw up out the window, but Matteo managed to stop the car and get me out before I had time to violently upchuck down the highway. I know. You've told me, Matteo said. I could practically hear the cringe in his voice as I threw up again, halfway through his sentence. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and stood up straight. My head felt a bit heavier than usual, and I'm pretty sure I could taste what I ate for lunch last week. With a deep breath, I shuffled back into the car and plopped into the leather seat. Matteo was already holding out a half-empty Gatorade bottle to me. I shook my head, declining the drink. Seatbelt. Matteo asked after a minute of me not moving from my slouched position in the seat. No, I want to die. I grunted tiredly. Matteo sighed and reached across my body to grab the seatbelt before buckling me in. I'm not a baby. I grumbled as he snatched the hand that I didn't wipe the vomit remnants from my mouth with. Take a nap. We're almost there, he stated, bringing my hand up to his lips. I'm not a baby. I grumbled once again, sinking further into the seat, preparing myself for another half-hour of my stomach churning. I know you're not. Just take a nap, Matteo repeated, still holding my hand as he started the car. Naps are great, especially after constant nausea kept you awake for 30 hours straight. Yeah, naps are the best. Kai, wake up. Correction, naps are the best until someone wakes you up. I groaned and rolled around in my seat. I was so tired. Kaya, Matteo repeated, making me groan again in response. Does he not understand that I want to be left alone? No, I snapped. I could only imagine the look on Matteo's face. He hated when I defied him, and I'm sure now wasn't an exception. Yes, he argued back. I couldn't be sure, but I would bet money on it if I had any that is gorgeous. Dark eyes were glaring holes deep into my skull as if I would combust if he did it long enough. Thanks. No, yes, no. Fine, Matteo stated, putting an end to our argument, which managed to knock me back a few pegs. Furrowing my eyebrows, creating little forehead wrinkles. Yeah, fine, he concluded. If you would rather sit in the car all night instead of sleeping in a bed, be my guest. A bed, I questioned out loud before it all sunk in, causing my eyes to pop open. We're here, I practically shouted as my body jerked forward. I would have been entirely captivated by the giant-looking building in front of me if it hadn't been for what I had heard. The rare noise alone had my ears perking up, and my head snapping in Matteo's direction. It was a chuckle. He's actually capable of laughter. Have my ears deceived me? Tu es agent extraordinaire, Wellen Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Matteo asked, seeming genuinely confused as all signs of laughter vanished from his face. I just shook my head and unbuckled my seatbelt. Nothing, I muttered, climbing out of the car and focusing my attention back onto the gigantic hotel in front of me. It's massive, I gaped, noting how freaking tall the building was. If I pushed someone out of the top floor window, they'd quite literally explode when they hit ground. Matteo didn't find my comment amusing. My legs felt like jello, but Matteo's strong grip on my hand helped me steady myself as we made our way into the hotel. He was basically holding my hand against my will. I wasn't much of a hand holder, but I let it slide. The less we argued, the better. Holy crap. I breathed as Matteo and I entered the building. Beautiful. White marble flooring covered the lobby, and the walls were touched with a light cream color complemented by dark wooden accents. A massive chandelier hung from the moderately high ceiling, surrounded by smaller light fixtures adding a luminous glow to the room, leaving me incomplete. Not to mention what was left of the evening sunlight pouring in from the giant windows that nearly covered an entire wall. Come on, Matteo ushered, releasing my hand and placing his on the lower part of my back to guide me forward. My feet moved me forward with Matteo's helpful push, but I was still too busy gaping at the lobby surrounding me. Everything from the rich, dark leather furniture to the people dressed to the nines within it had my jaw dropping. I had never imagined I'd be in a place like this with people like these. Many of them were dressed formally. Women were clad in dresses of all different colors, lengths, and shapes, and men in suits of all different shades of black. Others were dressed much like Matteo and I. Well, nor like Matteo. He had on a pair of well-fitting, dark jeans and a light, grey button-up polo shirt with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows showing off his muscular forearms. I, on the other hand, had on a pair of black leggings and a navy blue shirt with the American Eagle logo on it, which I had received from Matteo. I was in desperate need of a shirt after I had managed to vomit on myself. Sometimes, you just don't get out of the car fast enough. Alphanea's easy, eh? Nice to see you again. A man's voice spoke up, interrupting my gape. First, I jumped slightly at the sound of his voice. Matteo took notice and pulled my body closer to him. I didn't understand how, but something that would have normally actually managed to relax me in the moment. Alpha Mendax. Matteo greeted the tall, dark brown-haired man with a nod. The man's brown eyes found mine and traced over the contours of my face for a split second as I tried to remember where I'd managed to hear the last name Menda. Socius arrive yet? No, not yet, Alpha Mendax stated as a tall brunette squeezed her way into his side. Her arms wound around his torso as her head leant on the side of his chest. They'll be here in a few days. Bryce is having an issue with a rogue that keeps slipping past their patrols, he advised as his arm crushed the slender girl further into his side. I could only assume due to the mark on her neck that she was his mate. Must be exhausting, Matteo said, simply sounding bored. I got a hint from the uninterested look on Matteo's face that rogues were never really a problem for him, or at least never were, until I came into the picture. Seeing as you would know, Alpha Mendax commented, flashing his eyes down to me, and then quickly averting them back to Matteo. Are you trying to make assumptions about my mate? Baron, Matteo questioned with a deadly calmness laced within his tone, looking up into his eyes. They were a bit darker than normal, and staring intensely into Baron's. Everyone knew not to stare into the eyes of an alpha for too long. It was seen as a challenge and nothing good came from that. But Matteo was completely throwing that rule out the window. Baron Mendax. I knew that name. Where did I know that name? Looking back at the tall, well-built man, it all kind of clicked in place. Just Baron cracked under the pressure of Matteo's heavy gaze. He obscurely looked away, doing a great job at not making it obvious that he had just submitted to the alpha of Edis. Rune, I murmured to myself. My words came out in nothing above a whisper. But it would be insane to think that a werewolf, let alone an alpha, would not have heard me. At the mention of his pack, Barrett smirked at me. His mate mimicked the expression. Shocked. He asked Cook ILY. He was obviously used to female attention, and their amazement with being able to speak to him in person. He was a good-looking man. I won't deny that. Thick. Tatted arms led up to strong, broad shoulders. He stood at about Matteo's height. They were practically eye to eye. Dark brown hair, strong jawline, thick brows, a little bit of stubble. He was most certainly not an ugly person. If anything, calling him average was an insult. Yes, I stated breath ILY. I never imagined you'd have such a big head. I think I heard Matteo choke. Baron's mouth practically hit the floor. His mate buried her face into his chest to stifle a laugh while I could see in the corner of my eye Matteo biting his lip to put a stop to his laughter. Oh man, I wish he bite my lip like that. Baron sobered up after a moment before giving me a small smile with a bit of a smirk mixed in. She's got balls, he complimented. Come on. With a tug of her hand. They left Matteo and I. You just insulted an alpha. Matteo began as he turned to face me. I thought he was going to yell at me until a smile began to form on his handsome face. And I've never been prouder. Proud? I asked in a bit of shock. Am I sure this is Matteo? Laughing. Smiling. Being proud of me. No, not possible. He irks the shit out of me. He likes you. I joked, causing Matteo to roll his eyes and the smile on his face to disappear. He would like me dead. He argued. That didn't shock me much. Rune and Edis had been rivals for years. They're the two largest packs in both North and South America. They aren't in a war or anything that I know of. They just aren't fond of one another. It's a dominance thing, men. His mate seemed nice. I reasoned. He nodded. Farah's not insane. That's why. He doesn't seem insane. He doesn't seem insane. Matteo mocked me as he led the two of us to a desk. Wow, I drew out just as Matteo began talking to the man behind the desk about our room. Welcome to Manitoba. Alphaner's easier. The man greeted, handing over the keys to our room. He bowed his head respectfully to Matteo before looking down to me. Confusion masked his features as eyes flashed down to my neck. He was looking for a mark. Most likely unsure of whether to call me the L. Would or not. Let's go. Matteo ushered me by once again placing his hand on my lower back and guiding me forward. Who's all coming to this thing? To my agent extraordinaire, Marianne Nelbe. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience and enthusiasm. I asked as we got into an elevator. To my agent extraordinaire, Marianne Nelbe. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience and enthusiasm. Matteo questioned, pressing the button to take us to the 7th floor. I felt bad for whoever had to bring our bags all the way up here. Like, what packs are coming here? Are there going to be a lot more? Or is this basically just it? I reiterated. I already told you this. Probably one of the times I tuned you out. You get boring. I stated with a shrug, causing his eyes to roll again. A peace ends will be here. Socius? Telling you. To my agent extraordinaire, Marianne Nelben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Vindictor. Rune, obviously. Matteo continued to rattle off packs that were to be arriving here for the meeting, but I quickly tuned out. I was too busy internally panicking. My mouth went dry and my heart skipped a few beats. Unfortunately, I didn't die from it in that moment. Vindictor was coming. I was toast. I did not think this one through at all. Chapter 19, it's doomsday. Ladies. Daniela had to greet the two of us the next morning. She refused to drive the entire way to Manitoba, so she booked a plane flight. Smart girl. Somehow, even though she had been with me for a third of the time that Matteo had been, she noticed my angst far before he did. It was sort of infuriating, not going to lie. As soon as the elevator touched the 7th floor, I was inside of Matteo and I's room and bolting to the bathroom. Matteo didn't think it was anything other than a liver sickness. Really. Contrary to what Matteo believed, I didn't run to the bathroom to vomit up the rest of whatever was left in my stomach and a few internal organs. I ran in to get a hot shower in hopes that it would melt me and wash me down the drain. It didn't work. I also was 103% certain that I smelled like a combination of sweat and vomit, so I wanted to get that off my skin and out of my hair as soon as possible. Brushing my teeth 17 times didn't sound that bad either at that point. I never really had difficulty falling asleep, but I barely slept that night. Even after my parents vanished and left me alone, I slept most of my days. Sleep was more comforting to me than anything. Stressed sleep, sad sleep. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sleep. Worried. Sleep. Worried that an angry alpha is going to come and take you away from your mate that you could throw in a freezer sometimes. Sleep. Kidding. Falling asleep was practically impossible even with Matteo's brawny arms caging me against his sculpted body. I just laid there humming a song that I'd heard nearly 10 times when Matteo and I were on our way here. Still, Matteo noticed nothing. He acted like me humming at 330 am was normal. I eventually did fall asleep and ended up sleeping until 1 in the afternoon. I was extremely thankful that the leaders' conference didn't officially start until the day after. I doubt that I would have been able to wake up at 7 in the morning. At least, I had one more day with Matteo before I had to make a run for it. The moment that the alpha of Vindictapak realizes who I am, I'll have to haul us out of here. I snapped his mate's neck. There is no way that Adrian Rach is going to let me live after hurting his mate even though she would be perfectly fine by now. Alphas are petty, but I mean if someone snapped my neck, I'd want Matteo to kill them too. I was eating a late lunch when Daniela popped the "What the hell is up your ass?" question. To that I simply answered, "Aren't you just supposed to guard me and shut up?" Then, I had to make up some bullcrap story about how I was still feeling the effects of car sickness when I went to bed. And the lack of sleep was making me moody. She obviously didn't believe me. I could tell that Daniela knew I felt extremely anxious being around all of the alphas. I was just thankful that she didn't know why. Again, I had difficulty falling asleep that night. I had never been truly scared to the point where it was affecting my life. I wasn't afraid of Alpha Rach. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I was afraid of having to leave Matteo. I was never really a stand my ground kind of girl. I never had any ground of my own to stand. Normally, I would just cackle maniacally when danger got too close and run away to my next destination of choice. A slight nudge and a feather, light kiss to my temple was what managed to wake me up. It was actually amazing that something so simple could wake me up when I'd grown to be such a heavy sleeper. The small act had my eyes open in a second. "Come on," Kai, Matteo mumbled as he got up from the bed, to which I groaned. "Oh, great. It's doomsday." I pulled myself out of bed. I was going to make as much time with Matteo as possible. It was weird for me to think how obsessed with him I'd become, kind of disturbing. To be honest, Daniela picked out something formal for me to wear since I apparently lacked the brains to do so according to her. Personally, I wouldn't have picked the dress she had. It was black with black lace along the top just above my chest that led down into lace sleeves. The dress hugged every curve on my body and stopped a few inches above my knees. It was paired with black ankle boots that seemed to be made from some sort of fabric. It weirded me out a little bit, but they were soft, so I didn't hate on them. I looked good. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I wasn't going to deny myself that. I wandered into the bathroom after Matteo came out to do my freshening up. I lived with everyday morning breath for years. There was no way I was going through that. I stuck the toothbrush and one of the little travel-size toothpaste as my bra after I was done with it. Well, that's not noticeable. I huffed, trying to situate the toothbrush to where it wasn't noticeable. I gave up and just accepted that it was going to look like I had a nipple on the far left side of my boob. I didn't do anything fancy with my hair. I just brushed it. It was too long for me to want to do anything with. Not only was it long, but it was thick. I decided it would probably just be best to pull it back in a ponytail, leaving a few strands of hair to frame my face and pray that the hair tie didn't break. True. It would be absolutely hilarious to see a black hair tie zip across a room full of bikey people and most likely snap someone in the face. But I doubted Matteo would find it anything but humorous. Unless, perhaps, it was Darren that was the unfortunate pup to feel the wrath of my hair tie. Makeup, well, I didn't exactly have any, so that was not really a possibility. I exited the bathroom just to be greeted by Matteo seated on the edge of the bed. His large hands were fumbling with a dark, grey tie. I chuckled watching his brows draw together in frustration. Taking a few steps toward him, I snatched the grey material from his hands. "Let me help you," I said quietly. I hadn't done various ties in my life. How hard could the reverse be? My hands went to clipping the tie, so that it correctly around his collar. I could feel Matteo's dark eyes staring at me in awe. I didn't understand why. It was just a tie. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," I stated as the tie lay flat. I took a step back, admiring how droll, worthy Matteo looked. He was clad in a light, grey suit with a white, collared shirt under it. The tie was tucked into the jacket, which had been buttoned just to the lower part of his chest. His hair was the nicest and most contained that I believe I'd ever seen it. He obviously put something in it to control the usual dark, brown mess. It was taking a lot of self-control for me to not rip his clothes off and ride him until the only thing he could say was my name. I gulped, pulling myself out of my lusty thoughts just to see Matteo scanning over my body intensely with a similar expression, as if he was scrutinizing every curve, devote, and edge of my body. His eyes were a much darker shade of blue than normal, and they were getting darker by the second. Because of this, I knew his wolf was stepping forward. My ovaries went into overdrive, and I'm pretty sure if he even said my name, I would buckle into a heap of moans onto the floor. If I didn't know how important this whole conference was to Matteo, I'd just rip the dress off, toothbrush and all, and scream, "Take me to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Sadly, I feel as thought that would be frowned upon greatly. I took a step forward, watching Matteo's eyes narrow on me as if I were prey. It sent this giddy feeling all through me, but I shoved it all away. This was not the time for my inner slut to surface. I gently placed my hand on his rock-solid chest and placed a kiss to the fabric covering it. "We should get going," I murmured, pulling Matteo from his trance. I heard his throat clear as he took a step back and shook his head. I could tell by the look on his face and the way his jaw was clenched a bit too tightly that he was angry with who I assume was himself for almost losing control. Matteo hates that. He's such a control freak. No doubt, he'll be beating himself up over this for the rest of the day. "You're right. Let's go," he stated, guiding the two of us to the door before stopping abruptly to look at me. "When we get down there, just be quiet and listen. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," Matteo demanded. Normally, I would defy him and start singing show tunes, but not today. Not when there's an alpha out there on the hunt for me and probably a few others who could quite possibly remember me from a few close encounters. "Yep, no problem," I agreed. I managed to confuse Matteo by the look on his face because I hadn't snapped at him for bossing me around, but he quickly pushed it away. Without another word, we headed on our way. I knew Matteo sensed my nerves. He held my hand tightly, trying to comfort me the closer we got. I could tell he didn't exactly know what to do with me by the weird looks he kept pointing in my direction. He was probably having a mental debate whether to pull me aside and give me a pep, talk, or carry me in like a baby and growl at anyone who looked at me. Every once in a while, his hand would tighten as if he were imagining horrible instances that could happen. I never thought I'd say this, but I could have just used a hug. Nothing else. Just a hug. Too soon. We arrived at a pair of dark oak double doors. Matteo gazed down at me. I was gripping his hand so tightly that I'm sure it was hurting him at this point. Our eyes connected, and he said 3 words that caused a heat to bubble in my heart. I trust you. I was sucked into my own thoughts when Matteo opened the doors. I trust you. What the heck is that supposed to mean? Maybe he meant lust. Yeah, I lust you. That makes more sense. Matteo wouldn't trust me. No one does. Immediately, many pairs of eyes landed on the both of us, many pairs of not only confused eyes by shocked eyes. Matteo took the first step into the room, and I followed him. Our hands still entwined with one another. I was not letting go of him. No way. Not with everyone in this room staring at me like I just murdered an orphan in front of their own eyes. As we passed other alphas as well as other high-ranking pack members, they bowed their heads out of what I suspect was a little respect and a lot of fear. True, Matteo seemed to be one of the youngest alphas in the room, but that didn't stop him from being superior to them. He's the alpha of Edis. If you didn't bow your head to Matteo, there was a possibility that you could lose it. I only say that because once upon a time when Matteo's father was alpha, someone did. My eyes scanned the crowd of people for Adrian, but I couldn't seem to place him. Great. He's probably going for a sneak attack. I found someone much more frightening. Daniela. She was standing at attention with her arms crossed over her chest behind a large table at the head of the room. She wasn't dressed like the other people in the room at all. Unlike all of the alphas, Daniela had on a pair of black yogas which fit her perfectly the entire way down, met by a pair of black Timberlands. Her top half was clad in a tight white tank top underneath a black leather jacket, which was zipped up about halfway. She stood silently as she observed the entire room. It didn't even look like she was breathing. Oh my God, was she breathing? As Matteo and I got closer to the table, Daniela spotted us and nodded, acknowledging our presence. Her bleached blonde hair was pulled back into a tight bun at the back of her head. Darn, she's breathing. Wait, we're sitting up here. I asked as Matteo pulled out a chair in front of where Daniela was standing and gestured for me to sit. Yes, Kaye. We're sitting up here. He affirmed, making me gulp. Can't we sit like back there? Pointing to a corner way in the back. Matteo didn't even bother looking to where I was pointing. No, this is where we sit, he concluded strongly, putting an end to that. Okay, I mumbled as his giant paws hands placed themselves on my shoulders and pushed me down into the seat. I really was not trying to draw attention to myself by starting a shouting match with Matteo right then. It was already going to be hard enough trying to stay as low-key as possible sitting front and center. It was like my mate was trying to kill me. Stupid Edis back for having to be all high and mighty amongst the werewolf race. It was not long before we were greeted by Baron. Again. This time, Farah was not attached to his hip. She sat in a chair 2 seats down from us. Alphanair's easy. Baron greeted Matteo much more formally than he had in the lobby. He then turned to me, offering a small smile. I don't think I ever got your name, he said with a little smirk. Koya, I answered at the same time that Matteo snarled out a swift, "Don't look at her like that." Baron chuckled at Matteo's obvious distaste, just managing to make Matteo even more irritated. Where's everyone? Baron. Matteo snapped. Not bothering with formalities. Baron rolled his eyes, dropping the formalities. As well. Well, a Jackson Nilicorn will be showing up shortly. Brysek On and his beta are still working on the rogue issue, so they won't be here for another day or 2. And Adrian Rage is having issues with his mate, so I doubt they'll be showing up. I'm guessing she's making a big deal out of coming here. I don't really know the details. Just make trouble. What else do you expect from someone like her? To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He explained with a laugh. Matteo seemed annoyed by the news that he was just told. But I was more than happy. Maybe I was a saint in my past life. Just as I was about to crack a smile, the doors burst open, revealing a tall man accompanied by a short, dark-skinned woman. The man had light, brown hair and a pair of striking, light, blue eyes which contrasted greatly with the woman's dark brown eyes. "Who are they?" I asked quietly as the man's heavy footsteps got closer and closer to us. "Adjacent Nilla, Alphas of AP-Sens," Matteo advised as the couple sat down in the seats at the left end of the table. There were only 4 seats left. The 2 to the left of us and the 2 at the right end. "Who else sits up here?" I questioned. "Socius and Vindicta." I sucked in a deep breath and decided to stop asking questions before I threw up. Aim and Rest in Black entered the room, snatching away my attention. He shut the doors loudly before turning to look at Matteo from across the room. He then did one solid nod as if signaling something. On cue, Matteo sat up straighter and breathed in deeply. "Let's begin." Chapter 20. Love at first bite. I think I yawned approximately 37.5 times. The half because I went to yawn in the middle of Matteo's sentence, and he practically strangled me with his beautiful, navy blue eyeballs. Yep, exactly how I want to die. I quickly stifled my yawn and poorly covered it up with a cough. It ultimately sounded like I was choking on a lung. I don't think anyone was happier than I was to hear Baron call the meeting to a close and excuse us for lunch. I got a lot of weird and disapproving looks when I exasperatedly shouted, "Finally." I didn't mind. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Adrian wasn't here, and I couldn't be happier. I also wanted to get the heck out of the infested room that I'd been trapped in for hours. Obviously, I hadn't thought any of this through when I had forced Matteo to bring me to this. I was about to do a hop, skip, and a jump out of the room for a fancy hotel spaghetti platter, but Matteo anchored me inside of the room by latching his hand firmly around my wrist. I turned to him, gaping like a fish, when he shut me down. "We leave last." I never wanted to groan, scream, and cry so much at one time. Apparently, leaving last showed some sort of dominance and authority that I didn't really care about. That wasn't the case for Matteo. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." His alpha ego was all about his pride and ascendancy. Baron, being the prick of the century that he is, decided to stay back and have a conversation with a few alphas. The cocky doche kept sneaking me smug glances as I glared daggers at him. He knew how much I didn't want to be here any longer. Being around so many alphas at once had my nerves up a lot more than I had anticipated. Lashing out was my way of coping with it. I just wanted to leave. I was seriously hoping that if I glared long enough that Baron might combust. Eventually, Matteo let me leave after I started snarling. I just wanted my damn spaghetti. By the time I was able to leave the conference room, there was not a hint of spaghetti left in the dining hall. I had to settle for a ham and cheese sandwich. Yeah, a ham and cheese sandwich. I was settled back into our room for about 5 minutes before Matteo barged in. I greeted him with a simple hey. I expected something in return. Anything. I didn't get a single response, not a hello, or a stop eating on the bed, or even a grunt. He just completely ignored me. I then went on to offer him the crust of my sandwich that I didn't really want to eat as a peace offering. He responded by asking me, how childish could you possibly be? To that, I told him that if he didn't want the crust then he could have just said no. But Matteo wasn't talking about my crust. Oh no. We got into a heated argument about how my behavior during the meeting was admittedly immature, which concluded with me storming out of the room and slamming the door behind me. It wasn't a surprise to me by this point. We fight about everything all the time. If we didn't have an argument while we were here, I would have probably died from shock. That's how I ended up in my current situation. I admit, I do some not so smart things when I get a bit ticked whether I'm in the wrong or not. In this case, my infantile ass was definitely in the wrong. "Kaya," a masculine voice floated to my ears as a warm hand lightly shook my arm. I groaned and jerked my arm away. "Kaya," he repeated. "What?" I grunted tiredly. My body was sore, and I had a mild headache. I could already feel the hand returning to my skin. As an immediate reaction, my eyes popped open, and my hand shot out to catch the man's wrist before it could make contact with my arm again. I was met with a familiar pair of brown eyes. "Baron," I grunted as I released his hand and rolled over so that I didn't have to face him. "Can I ask a question?" he asked, making me groan. This was the worst idea I've ever had. I could have avoided this confrontation so easily. But no, I have to make stupid decisions when I get angry. "Go for it," I muttered. "Why are you sleeping on a couch in the lobby? Why aren't you sleeping on a couch in the lobby?" I retorted as I tried to make myself as comfortable as possible on the little couch with a scratchy texture to it. "Because I value the alignment of my spine," he answered, most likely taking in the cramped position I had forced myself into. The couch was not very big. I huffed and smushed myself further into the couch as if it would shield me from Baron's relentless questions. "Good to know," I muttered as a slight shiver ran through my body. I wasn't really used to sleeping without Matteo anymore. And when I did, I felt cold now. It was an extremely foreign problem considering I'd never had an issue with being cold before. "You and Matty, boy, get into a bit of a spat?" Baron asked, continuing his pestering. "Don't you have a mate that you should be with right now?" I snapped, trying to think of any way I could to get him to leave me alone. "Don't you?" With an obnoxious and extremely unladylike groan, I rolled over and sat up. Baron's cocky smirk was already plastered across his undeniably good-looking face with his bulky, tattered arms crossed over his broad chest. "Seriously, don't you have anything better to do than make me want to kill myself?" Annoyance flooded my tone, causing Baron to chuckle lightly. "No, not really," he stated simply. "So why is the budding romance suddenly beginning to crumble? Why do you care so King much?" I snapped, becoming more irritated by the second. The more time I spent with Baron, the more I wanted to stick needles in my eyes. I enjoy seeing everyone around me fail. "Please." "The only failure around here was your mother's attempted abortion which resulted with you." Baron faked hurt, putting his hand on his chest where his heart would be if he had one. "Wow, Kaye. Thanks for reminding me." "Anything for you." I smiled sweetly. "I hope you're this mean to Matteo." Shaking his head with a smile. "Poor guy. I'm not mean to Matteo." Baron drug out, obviously not believing a word that I'd said. "I'm sure that's not why men had to pull him off of an alpha today during a meeting. He didn't attack anyone," I retorted, furrowing my brows in confusion. "Not in the meeting you were at." "What meeting?" "The one I'm supposed to be in right now," Baron advised. I raised my eyebrows at him, sending him a silent, judgmental message. "What?" I got bored. "Well, go back," I ordered, already knowing there was no way he was about to listen to me. Why would I want to do that? He knew that he was annoying me, because King said so. "You moron," I snapped. "Do you contemplate anything?" Any normal alpha would have backhanded or even growled at me for being so disrespectful. But not Baron. He just stood there as cocky as ever. "You know, if Matteo wasn't your mate, I'd have you in my bed right now," he declared out of literally nowhere. "You know, if Matteo wasn't my mate, I'd kill you," I replied, which seemed to have no effect on him at all. "God, you're so hot," he breathed, causing me to roll my eyes. "You have a mate?" I snapped, disgusted by the imbecile in front of me. Did he really think I was about to sleep with him when I had my own sex on Lake Besant? That's cheating. Alpha idiot. He was literally just standing there as if everything he was doing was perfectly fine. It made me want to punch him in the face 10 times. If Jack was here, I'm sure Baron would be a goner. "Thera and I are complicated," he defended, trying to push it away by being short. "You mean you're complicated?" I fired back. No. That little innocent tack she does isn't true. I'm surprised I still have hair left all the shit she's put me through. He defended so. Be a man. Deal with it. Remembering all of the crap I put Matteo through already, he dealt with it. He dealt with me. "You marked her." That was just a reaction to seeing her for the first time. Oh, love at first bite. It wasn't uncommon for wolves to mock their mates upon seeing them for the first time. It wasn't much of a shocker to me, especially after seeing how Baron is. Like I said, complicated. Complicated doesn't give you an excuse to sleep around like a sex-crazed pup. Baron's cheeky grin faltered a bit. Apparently, I hit a bit of a nerve. I'm no cup. Kai, Baron chuckled, trying to make it seem like what I had just said had no effect on him. I, on the other hand, visibly cringed. I didn't like him calling me Kai. I only liked it when Matteo did. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Because no man allows others to disrespect what is, especially not himself, I concluded, feeling more and more guilty by the second about how I acted this morning. I think Baron noticed because he quickly veered away from my verbal beat down on him and turned it around on me. Is that why you're sleeping out here? He'd do something to you? Baron interrogated. I shook my head. No, it's not like that. Oh. This is about the meeting this morning, All that tension between you two. There wasn't any tension. He was pissed you kept interrupting him and making him look bad and shit. Wasn't he? Can you shut up? I snapped, finally annoyed by his constant interruptions. Now I know how Matteo always feels when he has to argue with me. I stood up and got right in Baron's face. Considering I was practically a head shorter than him, he had to look down at me with a stupid smirk on his face. Obviously, he wasn't threatened by me at all. I'm surprised he didn't see it coming. We all did. What? Amusement was dancing in his brown eyes as they watched my confused expression. I don't take it personally. You just aren't like us. And you never will be. They all know it. You know it. And so do I. Matteo will eventually. I can be a better leader than you ever will. I didn't really believe a word I was saying, but I couldn't help but want to prove him and everyone else wrong. He laughed sarcastically, making my teeth clench together. I can practically smell the blood on your hands. Watch me, I snapped, stepping away from Baron. I began walking away when Baron called out for me. What? I snapped as I turned back around just in time to see my toothbrush flying at me. I caught it, thankfully. I would have been embarrassed if I dropped it. Talk about a not-so-dramatic exit. Think you dropped that on the couch? I'm not going to say thank you. I detested childishly. I didn't expect you to. I left the lobby in a hurry. I bet I looked like a pissed off 5-year-old. By the way, I angrily held my toothbrush in one hand and stomped over to the elevator. I muttered to myself angrily the entire way up to the 7th floor. Honestly, what the hell is happening to me? As soon as the elevator doors opened, an abrupt scream left my mouth. I almost had a heart attack as I came face to face with the person from my nightmares. Daniela. What a vile bee. She just stood there with her perfectly groomed eyebrows raised at me with her arms crossed over her chest. She was like a female version of Baron. How disturbing. You done? She asked when I had finished screaming. Why did you have to do that? I asked, stepping out of the elevator and into the hallway. It's not my fault you're so dense. She replied as we walked down to Matteo and I's room. She made sure to stay behind me the entire time for whatever reason. What does that have to do with you scaring me? Nothing, she stated simply as she handed me a key to get into the room. I didn't bother saying thank you. I just opened the door and walked inside with Daniela in tow. Where's my mate? I asked, looking around the empty room that definitely had some damage to it since the last time I'd been here. I might be insane, but I'm almost positive that the television didn't have a hole through the center of it. A meeting. Alphas only, so you wouldn't have been allowed in any way, Daniela advised, which rekindled a memory of what Baron had said from earlier. Right. I drug out as I sat on the bed. Daniela stood in the doorway watching my every move. With an annoyed sigh, I motioned for her to come in. Seriously, stop acting like some fearless protector and have a conversation with me if you're going to stand in here. I'd rather not, Daniela stated, monotonously, making me produce a noise that sounded like a dying buffalo. Come on, I'm bored. Jack would have talked to me. I shouted in exasperation. Do I look like Jack? Daniela snapped. Her dark brown eyes were glaring intensely into mine, making me go silent. Didn't think so. Just get out. Obviously. You don't want to be here. I muttered. I can't leave, Daniela began. But I interrupted her before she had the chance to finish. Get out. I'm your L word. And it's a F-king order. I finally snapped. Daniela looked a bit taken back. I think she was at a loss for words. I can't leave you alone, Jesus Christ. I'm not going to do anything. Stop treating me like some piece of shit rogue. I'm not. Everything was just kind of exploding out of me. I was bubbling over. And I didn't know how to deal with it. Again, the emotional part of me that my dad always hated me for. I'm not a rogue anymore. Donnie, I stated calmly, looking her dead in the eye. Even if I still want to be. At this point, there's no way I'm a rogue anymore. I definitely don't feel like one. I don't feel like the old me. Danielle looked torn. I'd never had the chance to see Daniela look like she wanted to give me a hug. But there she was before my eyes, looking like she wanted to try to comfort me. Her body was slack and relaxed. Something that I'd never seen before. For once, she didn't look like she wanted to hurt me. Pushing away my emotions, I scowled down at the floor, trying to bring back some of my composure. Get out, I snarled. Without another word, Daniela left me alone in the room. I sat in the room just staring at the hole in the television for nearly an hour before I decided to take a shower and change out of the dress that I'd slowly begun to hate. I wanted to get a hold of Jack somehow, but with him being so far away, I didn't know how. I didn't know his phone number, and I didn't exactly have a phone to call him on. I just wanted to talk to someone. I eventually got out of the shower after contemplating drowning myself about 12 times. By the time I got out, it was already beginning to get dark. Wrapping the towel tightly around my body and stepped into the room to fetch some clothes. I only took one step out of the bathroom before my eyes connected with a pair of dark blues. I tightened the towel around my body. Neither of us said a word. We'd managed to exchange some pretty harsh words this morning along the lines of, would you just grow up? Already, and can't you just accept me for who I am? I don't think either of us rusted our tongues at this point. Matteo must have realized I didn't plan on speaking because he just nodded and started to walk to the door. Wait, I shouted it in a panic as I swiftly moved across the room. My hand wrapped itself around his wrist, pulling him toward me. His eyes found mine, sending a shiver through me. Oh man, I'm without clothes, and he could be in less than a minute. The possibilities are endless right now. I didn't mean it. I said, honestly, I didn't mean any of it. I didn't mean to make you look bad or embarrass you. Saying sorry was like cutting off a foot for me. It was hard. I hated it. And it never happened. I was not someone who said sorry a lot, if not ever. So, the fact that Matteo was just standing there staring at me like a tree after I had said it on my own free will was seriously making me panic and rethink everything. Did I pronounce it right? Is sorry the right word? Did I use it in the correct context? I was internally having a meltdown. I let go of Matteo's hand and gripped my towel. My eyes shifted to the floor, and I started to turn around, internally cursing myself for being so dumb. Why couldn't I have just been born a pack wolf? Then, this would have all been so much easier. I'd always know what to say, what to do. No one would think so badly of me, and I wouldn't feel the urge to do such bad things. Everything would be so much easier. I was pulled from my thought by an abrupt pull of my arm. My body quickly did a 180, and I didn't even have time to think before a pair of soft lips were placed directly on mine. As if a switch were flicked, I immediately melted into him. His hands came up to both sides of my face and held me right where he wanted me as he continued his assault on my mouth. I was in heaven. Well, that is until he pulled away. My lips were parted with my bottom lip pouted out a bit. I wanted to immediately protest him stopping, but Matteo beat me to it. You don't make me look bad. You don't embarrass me. Even if you did, I could care less, quite frankly, Matteo stated. staring into my eyes as if he was trying to see into my soul. What pissed me off is how stupid you made yourself look. I could give two shits if any half a staff in there thought any differently of me because of you. At the end of the day, they're all still going to respect me because if they don't, they know what will happen. I want them to respect you. A weird feeling bubbled in my chest, making my entire body feel a bit warmer. Any other time, I would have assumed it was lust. But I knew lust. This wasn't it. This was something completely different. It was this feeling that made my heart race, my cheeks heat up, and my head go a little numb. I'm going to try harder, I said quietly. It was weird for me to be so determined to do something that wasn't killing someone. So am I. I wasn't entirely sure what he meant by that, but I could take a few guesses. Either way, we were making progress. Matteo's strong arms pulled me to his chest and held me there. I was being cautious with my towel as I continued holding it with one hand, but the weird bubbly feeling in my chest was making my hands feel numb. Not to mention, the weird sparks erupting between the two of us as we touched was practically giving me a heart attack. You're one of the best things that's ever happened to me, I mumbled honestly into his well-defined chest, not even caring how weak I sounded. It felt right in worst way. It was like amputating a leg after a snake bite. You have to chop that shit off even if it hurts. For some reason, Matteo sighed into my hair, sounding defeated. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me.